don't know much about Czechoslovakia or the Slavic Revolution, but from what HROT has taught me, it looked to be very violent, very spooky, and very brown. I also didn't know that horses could wear gas masks, or that hammering down a bottle of wine could restore your health, but hey, you learn something new every day. While my knowledge of Eastern European countries and horse accessories may not be extensive, what I do know a lot about is game design, and HROT excels in its execution. Written in a custom Pascal engine to emulate the jank of 90s shooters like Quake, HROT is an intentional and beautiful homage to the games that gave birth to the FPS genre. Roughly translating to tip or point in English, HROT nails the core tenets of its game design. Recently, I attended an indie developer training that focused on the fundamentals of creating a game as a small or solo development team. One of these fundamental pillars was the importance of matching your game's scope to your skill level as a developer. This allows you to create a game that exceeds the expectation of the player without sacrificing the quality of the final product. HROT is a perfect example of a game created using this approach. Everything feels like it fits together here. From the visual style, to the character models, to the music and sound effects, each aspect of the game design matches the level of complexity of the next, making the final product feel cohesive and pure. This is all even more impressive knowing that the game is still in early access and being actively developed. Speaking of which, Episode 2 was just released, and it has improved on the first in every way. Spoiler here though, it is still very, very brown. In HROT's first episode, we were thrown into a time where an unspecified disaster had taken place in Prague, and though we weren't told what happened, the ominous feeling of despair could be felt through the game's grim atmosphere. Episode 2 starts in It starts in a castle, and the feeling of dread and despair is still ever present. We aren't given a lot of information on the plot of the second chapter, only that we will be visiting old Czech castles and monuments, both military and industrial. Ash rains from the sky, socialist propaganda can be found everywhere, and the headsmen of the town aren't particularly happy to see us. The visual theme of HROT carries through from Episode 1, but everything that complements that theme has improved. The world is still gloomy and depressing with its muted brown palette. The atmosphere feels dark and ominous, and conveys the feeling of what this period in Eastern Europe must have felt like. Though the look of the textures are similar, the overall variety has improved. From the bricks of the castles to the rocky tunnels in the uranium mines, level to level you will notice a more diverse feel to the surfaces. The geometry of levels is also more interesting, with less of that standard 3D block design. It's a little hard to explain what I mean, so here's a visual aid. Compare the first level of Episode 1 with the first level of Episode 2. Less straight edges and more variation in the shape and size of objects makes the levels more interesting to look at and explore. Or hell, just look at this cave. The level design has come a long way. So much in fact, that after the fourth map, I had to finally resort to looking at online guides to locate all the secrets. Maybe that's just my brain getting old, but they are well hidden and hard to find. Combat is just as satisfying as it was in the first episode, and hasn't really changed, but I think the headsmen are my new favorite enemy with their hilarious voice line when they spot you. The final fight, which I won't spoil here, is much better than it was in Episode 1, and even uses an item hunt on the penultimate level to help lower the boss's health. There is even a feeling of fighting the icon of sin from Doom 2 here, though in a much more active fashion. A dedicated kick key has also been added, so punting chickens is now a viable strategy. The greatest improvement over Episode 1, though, is the atmosphere. Here is the beginning of Level 2, the uranium mines. The music is foreboding and eerie. Ambient sounds are creepy and add tension as you explore. There is a real grittiness to the ambience, and it really drives home the fact that you are 1,200 kilometers underground in a cave used to mine radioactive material. Material so radioactive that even the guards are puking through their gas masks. And I know there is a running joke that all textures in the game are brown, but let's think about it for a minute. Everything that exists in HROT is there to give you a sense of a grim period of time, and the color scheme is also a representation of that. The desaturated brown tone conveys an oppressive atmosphere and really drives home how dreary the span of time was. If it was any other way, it would subtract from the tone of the game and the feeling it conveys. It was a dark time in a dark place, and the atmosphere of HROT captures it perfectly, even down to the pacing of the game itself. In my previous review of Project Warlock 2, I mentioned how difficult yet important it is to nail the pacing in a game. This is especially true when matching the game's tone. Pace and tone go together hand in hand, one complementing the other. HROT uses this concept to slowly elevate the tension and fear as you progress. Enemy counts are low, but meaningful, and increase in difficulty as you advance through the episode. As your arsenal improves, so do the enemies you face. The levels switch between wide open areas to claustrophobic tunnels and corridors, and they get larger and more complex as you advance through the episode. Encounters with large numbers of enemies are also used sparingly, and when they do occur, feel appropriate for the pace. This also works with the space between fights. You are given just enough time to start letting your guard down before rounding a corner with a grenade in your face, or you enter an empty room to be met with this. I only ran into one instance in the game where I felt I wasn't ready for a fight, and of course, it was against a bunch of angry socialist chickens. HROT is an excellent example of tone and pace complementing each other perfectly to deliver an experience that matches what you would expect, and the sound design enhances this even further. The music is creepy when it needs to be, and ramps up during larger fights. Ambient sounds in the caves and tunnels give a feeling of unease as you explore the dark corridors. Machinery makes eerie noises, like in this room, that when I entered I jumped thinking one of those gas mask horses was behind me. Even the sound of the use key is perfect for the atmosphere. Episode 2 of HROT had me on the edge of my seat multiple times, and I died a fair amount in my playthrough of the 9 levels. It is a huge improvement over the first chapter, and I can't wait for Episode 3. If you like Quake, or Chasm, or just solid FPS games in general, I highly recommend giving HROT a chance. And if it proves to be too spooky, just get drunk underground. And speaking of spooky, I'm going to try something a little different next time.